Hi everyone, this is Hannah at the Blue Hill Library, and I'm going to take you through the presentation I made on using Google Drive and Google Docs as services to help you store and share your files. What this presentation is going to cover includes the basics of Google Drive, how to add files to your Drive, a little overview of Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides, and then some information about sharing those documents. So to start with the basics, we're going to cover what is Google Drive, talk a little bit about cloud storage in general, discuss access and organization for your Drive, and then spend some time discussing the difference between Drive and Docs. To begin with, what is Google Drive? You may have seen this logo before. This is the logo for Drive, that green, blue, and yellow triangle. It's a product created by Google. So if you've got a Google account, such as one you use to access Gmail or any other Google services, you've already got access to Drive through that account. It's a cloud-based product, which we're going to talk about more in a moment, but it basically just means the information is stored on Google's servers and you access it through the internet. It's designed to help manage storage and sharing of different files. And it sort of includes these products, docs, sheets, slides, and more. And it is web-based. So we're going to talk today specifically about the web interface if you're using an internet browser such as Chrome, Firefox, or Safari to access the Google Drive website. There are also apps you can download for mobile devices to allow you to access the same service from there, but we're going to mostly focus on the web version today. So what is cloud storage? I think it's a term that a lot of people find intimidating, but all it really means is that it keeps your files on someone else's computer, somewhere else in the world, and you access them via the internet. So they're not stored physically on the hard drive of your device. They're actually stored somewhere else. It could be in another country, could be anywhere in the world, and you use the internet to gain access to them. So some pros for using cloud storage, some advantages to it. It doesn't take up space on your device. So if you're concerned about your computer or other device running out of room on your hard drive, using cloud storage can be a nice way to keep files without taking up that space. It is accessible from anywhere with internet. So if you find yourself traveling, using lots of different computers that maybe aren't your personal laptop, then being able to access something from any computer with internet access can be really helpful. Things on the cloud are safely backed up and stored, so you don't have to worry about losing them if a truck runs over your computer. They're still safely stored somewhere on another server, and generally companies like Google that manage cloud storage have lots and lots of backups, so you don't have to worry about them losing it either. And when things are in the cloud, they're easier to share because you can grant access to another person to use those files just as easily as you can from any computer in the world. Some downsides to cloud storage include that you usually have limited free space on the cloud. Google is pretty generous. They give you 15 gigabytes of space, which, across all of their products, Gmail, Google Drive, any other Google services you use, depending on what you want to use them for, that may or may not be totally enough to serve your needs. A lot of other cloud services have much more limited space for free. So if you don't want to pay for cloud storage, you do still have to think about space as a concern. Although most services have an ability to purchase additional storage pretty cheaply. So if you're willing to pay a little bbit extra, you can get a lot more space. It does make it harder to access your files if you don't have internet. So if your internet goes down or you're traveling somewhere without it, Google Drive specifically does have some ways that it can sync with your computer so that you can still have access to files even if you don't have the internet. We're not going to get too deep into that today, but just wanted to point out in general with cloud storage that is one limitation, is that it's usually much easier if you have internet access to be getting those files that are stored on the cloud. And you may have some privacy concerns around cloud storage. I say privacy more than security here. Generally, these files are going to be pretty secure from outside actors like hackers, provided that you have set a strong password for your account. I think the privacy concerns are more around the actual parent company that owns the storage space and their privacy practices. If you go back and listen to my Getting Started with Gmail presentation, I go into a lot of detail about Google's privacy practices and some of the ways you can limit the data gathering that they do on your account. But you may still have privacy concerns, so you should think carefully before you put something on cloud storage if you're worried about Google knowing about it and who they may or may not be sharing some of that information with. But if you get over those downsides and you want to use cloud storage, again, you've got access to Google Drive if you've got a Google account. If you don't have a Google account, again, that Getting Started with Gmail presentation that I created will go through the steps for how to create one. But if you've already got one, if you're a Gmail user or you've created a Google account before now, there's a couple different ways that you can access Google Drive from any web browser. You could type into the address bar in your web browser drive.google.com and go straight to that website. Or if you've got Gmail open or some other Google page open, you should see this square of squares that's circled in red in the upper right. And clicking on that will show you all of Google's different services that you can navigate to, one of which should be that Drive icon that we talked about before. Either way will get you there, and again, you can use any web browser. I think some people feel like you need to use Google Chrome if you're using Google Drive because they're both by Google, but that's not true. A web browser is just kind of the vehicle that's taking you to this website. So whatever web browser you usually use to visit websites, you can use that to access Google Drive. Once you open up Drive, I think a lot of people have this experience. They've never used it before, but they see all these files in there that they didn't expect to see. And there's several reasons that that could be. Because it's really integrated with Gmail, if you use Gmail regularly, you might have had things shared with you in Drive that you didn't realize that were just sent to you as email attachments, or things that you were sending as email attachments to other folks. And if they were, outside of the size limit for what Google will let you attach, then they automatically just turn it into a file stored on Drive and send the link to the other person. So that might be some reasons why you've got some stuff in here that you didn't necessarily expect to see when you were first getting started. But the general layout includes this sidebar on the left-hand side. That looks really similar to Gmail. It's going to help you navigate between different areas of your Drive. You've also got across the top this quick access pane that shows you selected files from Google. So these are just the first few things that you're going to be presented with that for some reason Google thinks might be the ones that you want access to the most quickly. Maybe you've edited them recently or someone shared it with you recently. So that's not an exhaustive list of your files. It's just a little selection that Google created for your convenience. If you've got any folders, they'll be listed next, and then after that, the actual files that you've got up on Google Drive. And you can toggle back and forth between some different views. So this view, everything kind of has its own little box that it's in, but there's this button near the upper right where you can change it to more of a list view. And that will look a little more like this. So in addition to the name of each item, you have a little bit more information about it, including who created it and when it was last modified, all of the details like that. I prefer to keep my Drive in this format rather than the grid view where you just see the boxes for each item. This allows you to sort of sort it in a couple different ways if you want to. It's generally sorted alphabetically by the name of the folder or file. But if you click where it says name at the top of the list, it will change it so it's reverse alphabetical. The other way that you can sort it is by clicking where it says last modified at the top of the list. And that gives you some options where you can sort it by either last modified or last modified by you specifically. There's a few different date options in there. So that's one reason that I like this view, is that it gives you some more options to organize and sort things. But mostly I just like having that additional bit of information rather than seeing the more visual. But you can use whichever one of those views works for you, and you can switch between them anytime using that little button in the upper right next to the information icon. You can also search through your drive. So again, especially if you've already got a bunch of stuff in there that you don't necessarily know where it came from or how it's organized, and you're looking for a specific file, there's a search bar at the top center of the page. You can use it to just simply type in a keyword and search that way. Or if you click the little arrow on the right end of the search bar, it will open up this advanced search view. And again, this is pretty similar to Gmail if you've ever used the advanced search there, but it gives you all of these different options for criteria that you could search by. So you could look for a certain type of document, a document owned or managed by a particular person. You could search by date, and then all these different keyword fields, whether that's in the name or the body of the text or other folks that you know it's been shared with. And you don't have to fill out the entirety of this form. You can simply select whichever piece or pieces of information you know to be true and leave the rest blank. So that's a nice, powerful search feature, and we know that Google's very good at searching since that's their whole game. That's how they came onto the scene, was as a search engine. Other things that you can do from this main view in Drive, if you select any file in Drive, just click on it once to select it, you'll see it becomes sort of highlighted in blue, and these buttons will appear across that top toolbar. So they weren't there when you didn't have it selected, but once you click once on something, you'll see first these 4 buttons that are circled in the wider oval. These buttons are kind of the basic functions. The first 2 have to do with sharing that document with others, and we're going to go more deeply into sharing a little later. The third one, the picture of the eye, gives you a preview of it, so you can take a look at what's in it without actually opening it all the way up. And then, of course, the very useful trash can icon will let you move that document to your trash, so it's no longer in your drive. And then the little 3 dots, if you click on that, it will expand out even more options for what you can do with the file that you've selected. I'm not going to go all the way into detail about all of these, but for example, you could rename it if you want to change what it's called. You can make a copy of any file that you've got in your drive, so that just simply duplicates it. You've got it in there twice, and then you could keep one as is and edit the other. You can also download, which is something you might want to do if you've stored files on Google Drive that are not openable in Google's apps. And if that doesn't make any sense to you right now, I promise we're going to cover it in depth momentarily. But just know if you click on those 3 dots, that gives you lots more options for things you can do with the file in Drive. And you might want to consider creating folders in Drive. So just like you might use folders on your computer to organize your files, you might have a documents folder, and within that you might have a folder for taxes or some other folder to help you separate out different documents. You can do exactly the same thing in Drive. So if you think you're going to be using Drive a lot and storing a lot of things on here, I encourage you to create a folder. You can click on the New button, which is at the top of that left-hand sidebar. And the very first option that comes up is to create a folder. So click on that, create a folder. You can create as many of them as you'd like to help organize your files on Drive. Okay, I'm going to spend a good amount of time discussing Google Drive versus Google Docs. A lot of people will sort of use these terms interchangeably, but they are slightly different. So Drive is this repository we've been looking at that stores your files on Google's cloud, whereas Docs is kind of a separate application that's related that allows you to edit those files online. So Drive, you can store any kind of file on there, but docs, you can edit specific types of word processing files. So you can see in this picture, I've circled the icons next to these first two items in my drive. The first one has that blue square with a white W in it, and that indicates that this is a document that I created in Microsoft Word. The W's for Word. It's a Word doc. I opened up Word on my computer, I typed it up, and then I uploaded the file to Drive to store it here. The second one down you can see is also a blue square, but it's got these white lines instead of a W. And that icon is indicating that this is a proper Google Doc. So this is a document that I never opened in Microsoft Word. I simply created it using Google's tools. So it's always been online. It's a completely web-based document. And these files are pretty interchangeable. You can convert them back and forth to the different types. But this distinction is just about whether it was created and is in the format of a file from an outside program or one of Google's formats, such as Google Docs here. And looking the rest of the way down this list, the next one down is an MP4 video. So again, I created that on my computer and I simply uploaded it to my drive so I could share it more easily with my friend Chris for his birthday. The next item down is a PowerPoint presentation. So similarly to that top item, it's a Microsoft proprietary format. I created a presentation using Microsoft PowerPoint, and then I just uploaded it here to store it. And then the bottom three are all ones that were created using Google's tools. So a couple more Google Docs, and then a Google Sheet at the bottom is that green icon with the little crosshairs in it. So we'll talk a little bit more about Sheets and Docs in detail later, but I wanted to really try to drive home this distinction that you can use Google Drive for these two purposes, both to store files that you've created using other programs on your computer, as well as to create and store new files that you edit completely through your web browser. And if you prefer that other more visual layout in Drive, I just wanted to point out this is, it still shows you that those same icons. So those two that are circled, again, the one in the middle, Book Club order, is a Google Doc that I created online using Google's word processing tool. And the one on the right, Brave New World, is a Microsoft Word document that I typed up in Word and then uploaded to Drive to store it here. So you can still see that distinction even if you're in that more visual view as opposed to the list view that I was showing before. Okay, to continue talking a little bit about the differences between these two things. On this top picture, this is that Brave New World.docx. This is a Microsoft Word document that I have uploaded to store it on Google Drive. And you can see it opens up with this sort of preview view. I can see the text of the document, but I can't edit it or change anything about it from this view. And you can sort of still see the Drive stuff in the background, kind of behind a transparent layer of black. And at the top there, I've circled that this is still in the same tab in my internet browser. So you may or may not be comfortable using lots of multiple tabs while you're browsing the internet, but Google Docs will automatically open a new tab, as it did on the bottom screenshot, if you're actually opening a Google Doc as opposed to just a file that's stored in Drive. So that's one difference between them. The top one, this file I created elsewhere and stored in Drive. When I double click it to open it, I just see this preview and I stay in the same tab. The bottom one, which is an actual Google Doc, if I double click it from Drive, it opens up in a new tab. So you can see to the left of the circled tab, the My Drive window is still open, and this just opened itself up automatically in a brand new tab for me to look at. And it looks a lot different than the top one. I have all of these editing tools, and I can actually type in here and make changes as I want to right on my web browser. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. One thing that I mentioned before is that you can switch back and forth. So on this top screenshot again, over on the right, I've now circled the download arrow. You could click on that icon if you want to download this document, take it off the internet, save a copy on your computer. You could open it up in Microsoft Word and make more changes. If you wanted it to be reflected on Google Drive that you made those changes, you'd have to upload a new copy to Drive. But you could also click right in the center of the screen where it says Open with Google Docs, and that will convert this document into something that looks like the screenshot I've got below. So we'll actually change it from just a Microsoft Word file that you're storing on Drive into a Google Doc that you can edit still in your web browser. Okay, so speaking of adding files to Drive, that's the next topic we're going to cover. There's a few different ways you can get files into your Google Drive. We're going to talk about uploading them from your computer, adding them straight from emails, and then adding files that others have shared with you into your Drive. So to start with uploading files from your computer, again, this allows you to store a copy of a file, any file type, from your computer by uploading it to Drive. So to do this, again, you would click on that New button at the top of the left-hand sidebar, and then select the second option in the list that comes up, File Upload. This will open up a dialog box where you can find wherever you've got that file saved on your computer. Might look a little different depending on whether you're using a PC or a Mac, but it does allow you to navigate through your different file folders on your computer and find the item that you'd like to add to Drive that way. The other way that you can upload files from your computer, if you'd rather not have to dig through those dialog boxes, is you can drag and drop. So if you have a window open with that file already displayed in it, or you want to drag it over from your desktop, for example, you can simply hold down on the file, drag it over, and then release it anywhere kind of in the center of that list of files in Drive. Either way, whether you go to New and then Add File, or you drag and drop it, you will see a little message appear in the bottom right of your screen in Drive. Once the upload is complete, it'll say one upload complete. You can also add multiple files at once if you're dragging and dropping. So, it could say 5 uploads complete once you've got them all up there. And once the upload is complete, you'll also see it added to your list of files. So it'll show up in that Drive view alphabetically in the list of files that you've got on there. So that's one method of adding a file onto your Drive. Just takes what you've got on your computer and makes a copy of it to stick on Drive. If you use Gmail, their webmail service, then you can also add attachments that someone has emailed to you directly to your Drive from the email. So here's an email, and you can see there's a Microsoft Word document attached to it. And if I move my mouse over that attachment, I get these 3 different buttons that show up. So the one on the left is a download button. Again, that would download this file to my computer, and I could open it up in Microsoft Word if I wanted to make changes. The one in the center there, you'll recognize that Drive icon, the little triangle. If I click on that, it will add this file directly into my Drive. So it'll add it to that list of files that I've got saved in Drive. And it'll still be this .docx Microsoft Word file. And then the button on the right, the little pencil, would allow you to actually change it into a Google Doc and edit it in Drive. So like we talked about before, that's just like clicking that center option in the screen that said open with Google Docs. So that's one nice thing. If you use Gmail, Google's email service, it's fully integrated with Drive. So it allows you to kind of move back and forth pretty easily from email to Drive if someone sends you a file that you'd like to add into your Drive. And lastly, you can also get files into that list under My Drive if they've been shared with you by someone else. So when someone shares a file with you on Drive, it will be listed under this Shared with Me option in the left-hand sidebar that you see I've got circled there. Clicking on that will show you everything that anybody has shared with you and sent you that's stored on Google Drive. So they'll stay under there, and if that's an easy place for you to find them, and that's fine. You don't have to do anything else to be able to access them. But if you would like to have them show up in that list under My Drive, so you don't have to dig around under your shared files to find them, then there's a button here. Once you've selected a file, click once on it to select it, and these buttons across the top appear. And you'll see there's one that looks like the Drive icon with a little plus sign. That enables you to add a shortcut to that file to your Drive. So it will basically add a link to it in the list of files under My Drive, so you can get there quickly and easily if you don't want to have to look under Shared with Me in order to find it later. Okay, so that was all kind of the basics of using Google Drive itself. Drive being the storage center for any files that you want to put there to have Google store them on their servers. Next up, we're going to look a little more closely at Google Docs. So Google Docs are the actual word processing software that Google allows you to use in conjunction with Drive. We'll talk about how to create a Google Doc, editing docs, and then go over a few tips and tricks that make Google Docs a little different from other word processing software. So if you would like to create a Google Doc, you can start in your Drive. You click on that New button at the top of the left-hand sidebar again, and you're going to select the option that says Google Docs. Again, that will open up a Google Doc in a new tab. So you can see in this picture across the top, you've got this untitled document that you've just opened, and My Drive is still open in the background in a different tab. You can rename the document in the upper left corner. Just click on there and type in whatever you'd like it to be called. And again, I would encourage you to think about staying organized in your Drive by naming it something that's going to make sense to you and be recognizable later down the road. So once you've got your doc open and you've named it something very descriptive and helpful like test doc, it will look something like this. If you've used any kind of word processing software before, like Microsoft Word or Pages from Apple, you'll see it looks really similar to that. It's got all the same kinds of tools. Right above the document, you've got these text editing tools, so you can change the font style and size, make things bold or italics. You've got those 3 dots at the end of that row that will open up even more options for you, such as creating a bulleted list or changing the indentation. I'm not going to go into extreme depth into all of those different functions, but again, it's really, really comparable to other word processing software. You've also got these additional menu options across the top under those File, Edit, View, Insert, etc. menus. And that's going to give you even more features and tools that you can use in Google Docs. Again, similar to what you would find in other word processing software like spell check, word count, inserting a table, page breaks, columns, all of those kinds of features that you would find in Microsoft Word or any other word processor are going to be here on Google Docs as well. Some things that kind of set Google Docs aside though, one is that changes are automatically saved. So you'll notice if you go under the File menu, it gives you some options to download and save a copy in a different format, but it doesn't just have plain save. And that's because as long as you're connected to the internet, every time you're typing and making changes, Google saves them automatically. And so you can see here it says all changes saved in Drive. And if you click on that, it will show you a version history of all the different edits that you've made. So clicking on that brings you to a page that should look something like this. You've got which version you're looking at listed at the top there. On the sidebar, you've got a list of all the different versions that Google has saved over time. And clicking on a different date will show you a different version. And then in the center, you actually see the text of your document. and anything that's been changed since the prior version will be showing up highlighted, so it's pretty easy to look through and spot the differences. And you can always go back to previous versions if you changed something and then you decided you really liked the way it looked yesterday better. You can just go to this version history, select an earlier version that you want to revert to, and a big button will appear right next to the date and time at the top of the screen that says restore this version, allowing you to simply go back to that version. So everything that you've changed is preserved and you don't have to worry about saving as you go. You can also see when the document was last changed. So on the prior photo, it was saying all changes saved in Drive because I had just made changes recently. But if you haven't adjusted a document for a while, it will change that text to just indicate to you how long ago the last edits were made. And again, clicking on that will still take you to the version history. You can also see who else is currently viewing the document. So that's one big thing about Google Docs is that they're collaborative. You can share them with other people and people can be viewing and even editing the same document at the same time. So up here where I've circled this pink M, that's telling me that my friend Matt is also viewing the document at the same time that I am. So that's a little spot that allows you to see if anyone else is online right now with this document open. While you're collaborating with other people, if they're working in the document, you will see a cursor that is the same color as whatever that initial is at the top of the page, kind of trying to help you indicate who's who. And you'll actually be able to see them, typing, making changes, deleting, all those changes will be happening and you'll be able to see them in real time. So you can work together at the same time as someone else if you're taking notes on the same thing or collaborating on a project or document. Everybody can be in there typing and you'll be able to kind of indicate who is who by seeing these colored cursors moving around as people click and type. If working collaboratively and making changes all at the same time sounds a little overwhelming or not quite right for the project you want to work on, you also have the option to add comments. So if you don't want to just outright change something in someone's document, but you want to make a suggestion or a note, you can highlight a piece of text. It can be as short as a single character or as long as a whole page. Basically, whatever you want to focus your comment on, highlight that, and then this plus sign button will appear over near the right-hand margin. Clicking on that allows you to type in a comment. Once you've added that comment, it'll just appear in the right-hand margin and everyone who has access to the document will be able to see it. So, if you're making suggestions to someone's story, you can leave a comment, they'll be able to see it, they can, take your idea under consideration, and that resolve button that is sort of faintly there next to the name of the user, if you click on that, it'll remove the comment. So that's a little less invasive way to collaborate using Google Docs if you don't want to actually make the changes in the document. Although, remember, if you do make changes in the document, all those versions will be saved in that version history, so you can always go back and revert to a prior version if you want. Okay, so that's a very brief overview of Google Docs. You could do a whole hour-long presentation just on using Docs, but those are the basics, and hopefully you'll be comfortable using it, especially if you've used a different word processor in the past. Similarly, Google Sheets is Google's answer to Microsoft Excel and similar spreadsheet products. So we'll cover that pretty quickly, talk about creating a Google Sheet, editing, and then again, those tips and tricks. Creating a Google Sheet looks really similar to creating those other things we've made in Drive. Simply click on the New button at the top of the left-hand sidebar, and then select Google Sheets. And again, it's going to open up a Google Sheet in a new tab. So Drive is still going to be open in the background. And it allows you to rename it, title it in the upper left corner there. So here's a little bit more of a zoomed out view of what a sheet might look like. It is a spreadsheet, so you've got columns and rows, and then the intersection of each of those is called a cell, and that's where you can enter a piece of text or a piece of data. A lot like Google Docs, you've got these editing tools across the top of the page. In this case, a lot of them are more geared towards numeric values because you might be using more numbers in your spreadsheet. So in addition to things like bold and italicized and colors, you can do things like adding and removing decimal places, formatting your numbers to look like currency or percentages. And again, that 3 dots at the end of that row of all the tools will give you even more options. And you've got the additional menus across the top, just like before. So you can use that to do more formatting of your data, add formulas, and all kinds of things like that. And I will say, Google Sheets has come a long way. When it first started, it was much less powerful than Microsoft Excel. I think if you're an extremely robust Excel user, there may still be some things that Excel can do that Google Sheets can't, but it's really come a long way in terms of, you know, being able to use formulas and tables, and it can do nearly all of the same things in Microsoft Excel. So if you're anything other than a huge Excel head, Google Sheets will be able to help you with pretty much all of your spreadsheet needs. Again, just like in Google Docs, your changes are automatically saved, and you can click where it says that to see the history of your edits. It's going to look really similar when you click on that to the way it looks in Google Docs. You'll have the version history down the right-hand side. Clicking back and forth between different versions will highlight what changes were made in that most recent version. And you can always go back and restore a prior version if you want to revert back to something from before some changes were made. Okay, and then lastly, I'm just going to touch on Google Slides. This is sort of Google's answer to PowerPoint or other presentation software. It's actually what I used to create this presentation and my other technology workshop presentations. So we'll talk about creating a Google slide deck, editing slides, and again, some of those tips. So this is probably going to look pretty familiar. To create a Google slide deck, you click on that New button on the top of the left-hand sidebar and select Google Slides. It will open up a presentation in a new tab. That Google Drive will still be open in the background of another tab. And you can title it in the upper left corner. So slides might look a little more intense than some of the other programs that we've looked at, but it's again really similar. You've got these editing tools across the top there, and these are going to be slightly different from Sheets or Docs. They have a lot more things like shapes and text boxes and images, things that you might be more inclined to use in a kind of presentation. And you've got those menu options across the top, just like always, that allow you to do things like arrange what order things are on the slide and add transitions and things like that. On the left-hand sidebar, there's going to be an outline of your presentation. So whereas in the center is the slide that you're currently looking at and editing, on the left-hand sidebar, it's going to show you all the different slides you've got and a little preview of each of them so you can see what order they're in and kind of get the general shape of your presentation. And when you first open up a new slide deck, on the right-hand side here, it's offering you some different themes. So themes are sort of cohesive designs for a slide presentation. You may have noticed during this presentation that all of my titles for each slide are in orange font at the top of the slide, and there's this little teal bar across the bottom. I've got some additional types of slides, like title slides, that have more of that teal color on them and things like that. So that's what those theme options are. They allow you to select kind of preset aesthetic choices for your slides so that you don't have to decide on the font color and style of each and every slide. So you can use those themes if you want, or you can just get creative and make something yourself. Again, just like with Google Docs and Google Sheets, all your changes to your slide presentation are going to be automatically saved as you go, and clicking on that little line will let you see your edit history. It's going to look really similar in that version history to the other programs that we've looked at. You've got a little preview of all of your slides, and then on the right-hand side, the actual versions you can click between. And once again, any changes between different versions are going to be highlighted so you can see the difference, and you can revert back to an earlier version anytime you like. Okay, so I know that was a quick overview of those three products, Docs, Slides, and Sheets, but they are really similar to some other products you might have used before, and they're fairly user-friendly, especially if you've used other Google products like Gmail, if you want to get started with them. Google also does offer other products that are stored in Drive, such as creating forms and websites. I'm not going to get into all of those today, but if you look under that new menu, you can see that there's some additional options beyond the big three programs that we talked about today. So the last thing we're going to cover as part of this presentation is just about sharing things on Drive. That's one of the big advantages to Drive, is that it makes it easy for you to share your files. So we'll discuss sharing them with others, different levels of access that you can grant people, and then just a quick note about deleting as it relates to sharing. So you can share any Google Doc or file that you've saved on Google Drive with specific people by using the share function. So again, this top screenshot is a file that is just stored on Google Drive. It's not a Google Doc itself, it's just a Word file that's stored on Drive. And if you click on the three dots on the upper right when you open it up, there's an option there to share. Whereas the bottom document is a proper Google Doc created using Google Docs, and the share button there is a little more prominent. It's that big blue button in the upper right. But either way, whichever kind of thing you're trying to share, clicking on that share button will open up a box that looks something like this. And so you can see there's kind of two options here. You can send an invitation to specific people via email. So that's granting that specific user access to your document. Or you can simply copy a link, which will send people, if they click on it, to the document. So the top option is actually going to send like an email invitation to people so that they can get notified that they've been granted access. Whereas the bottom, you might want a link if you want to post a link to it on social media, or invite people yourself, typing out your own email without Google sending it for you. And if you do want to post it more publicly and allow anyone to view it, you're going to need to click all the way at the bottom there where it says change to anyone with the link. And that's kind of the difference between saying only the people that you've already added to the list above can access it through the link, or anybody who clicks on it can access it. If you do want to share it with a specific person or people, you type their email address in and select them. If you want, you can add a little message to Google's email to them to give them a personalized message about why you're sharing this with them. And clicking on send here will send them the link and an invitation. Before you send it, you can also decide what level of access you want that person to have. So we talked a little bit about how, people who have access to your Google Doc can edit it alongside you. But if you don't want them to be able to actually make all those changes, you can limit it a little bit. You could make them just a commenter. They'd be able to use that comment feature and add their notes that way, but they wouldn't actually be able to change the text itself. Or you can send it to them just so that they can be a viewer. So they can look at it, they can read it, but they can't add comments or make any changes. Those are the three levels of access that you can grant to an individual to look at your document. And again, looking at that link view, if you change it to anyone with the link, you can do the same thing. You can say anyone with the link can view it, anyone with the link can edit it, anyone with the link can comment on it. So this is just a choice you want to make on any individual document to figure out who you think might use it and what you would like them to do. Sharing does definitely work best with others who also have a Google account. Certainly viewing, if someone doesn't have a Gmail or a Google account, you can allow them to view it. But commenting and editing, you really do need to have a Google account in order to do successfully. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're sharing these out. But if you'd like, you could set it so that anyone with the link can view it, and you can add particular people who could comment and edit. So that might be the case if you have something that you want everyone to be able to read, and you could post the link on your Facebook page or send it out to your whole email list. But only you and a couple other folks who are involved in the project should really be able to make changes. You could add those people specifically and give them editing privileges. So that's a little bit about the different levels of access that you can grant people and how you can send them links and access to your Google Docs. When you have shared a file or a Google Doc with others, they will get a little symbol next to their name in Drive. So you can see I've circled it here. It just looks like a couple little people, and that's to indicate to you that that file has been shared with someone. And then the last thing I wanted to cover is just about deleting, especially as it relates to sharing. So anytime you delete a file or a doc from your Google Drive, you can, click on the trash can icon or drag it over to trash, and it will stay in trash until you manually empty your trash. So a lot of Google services, like in Gmail, your trash will get emptied automatically after 30 days. But in Google Drive, you actually do have to go in and permanently delete what's in your trash if you want it to really be gone. And part of this is because files that you've moved to your trash will still be accessible to others that you've shared them with until you do that final step of deleting it out of your trash. So if you've emailed something to someone and sent it to them as a Google Drive link, and you then are done with it and you want it to be out of your drive, you can move it to your trash and they'll still be able to access it until you actually take that last step of going into your trash and deleting it again from there. That's the point at which they'll lose access to it. So before you do that, if you're worried about whether they got it and saved it, you might want to check in with them and say, hey, make sure you download a copy of that before I get rid of it. I'm about to empty my Google Drive trash. Or if you're not running out of space and you're not really concerned, and it's mostly that you want to get it out of that list under Drive so that you can stay organized and have things cleaned up there, you could move it to your trash and leave it there forever and not have to worry about them losing access to it. So that's my quick addendum about deleting as it relates to sharing. If you're interested in learning more about Google Drive, there's a few good sources out there. The Goodwill Community Foundation has some really good tutorials related to Google services. They've got good videos that they've made about using Drive and Docs and some of these other things we've talked about today. And Google has some pretty good support pages on their website. They have support for everything related to every Google product, but specifically about Drive as well. And those are great text-based step-by-step directions if you have a question or there's something you want to do that you're not quite sure how to accomplish. Looking on their support pages can give you a good step-by-step walkthrough for how to do that. If you've got further questions after watching this presentation, you're welcome to get in touch with me. All my contact information's on the library's website at bhpl.net. And myself and other library staff have been working one-on-one with folks on technology questions during this time. So if you want to set up an appointment with me or with a colleague, we can get that set up for you and get you the help that you need. So thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.